Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Good question.
Governor Romney has a lifetime of experience negotiating with people. He was a businessman. He negotiated with investors. He bought and sold companies. He knows how to sit at the table and the give and take, and he's willing to do it. Nobody who's ever done business with Governor Romney throughout his long and successful career has ever said he was not a fair and honest and decent person to negotiate with. And we see that during his 4 years as governor of Massachusetts. I would say that his success as a governor was not because he had what are now Democrat positions. His success was his ability to talk about issues with people from the other side and reach a common ground. And we don't see that with President Obama, who I'd like to emphasize in his very first meeting with House Republicans after he was elected, after he was sworn in January of 2009, he said, "I won. You just now have to deal with it." This was his very first meeting. He immediately indicated that he was not interested in being bipartisanship. So I think a lot of the criticism that the Republicans get is grossly unfair, and we've seen it across numerous issues. But I think we could have confidence from Governor Romney's record that he will act in a bipartisan way, and he will be willing to sit and negotiate with the other side. We don't see that with President Obama.
Thank you, Ross. Jeff, your turn.
I mean, that's a kind of a question of our time, and I think, you know, in all honesty, both parties have a lot of blame to go around, and it's very harmful to the country. And a lot of people don't see it getting any better, so that makes it even more urgent. This is something you don't hear about on the campaign trail ever, but my personal view is that we need some systemic, fundamental changes to how elections are run, how districts are set. There's a lot of gerrymandering that's gone on for decades and decades and decades. By the party in control, controls the boundaries of the elections, which candidates run where. So that increasingly, there used to be a lot of electoral districts that were quote-unquote swing districts. They had a mix of Republicans and Democrats from all income backgrounds and varieties. They roughly followed geographic areas, but now we see that they're often over decades and decades of changes, they're contorted. They look like spaghetti now. And that's been a result to try to, whenever you have the power and control, to try to redraw those boundaries to give it in your favor. And the moderate Democrat and the moderate, especially the moderate Republican, is, I would say, extinct now. And the moderate Democrat is probably, unfortunately, not far behind. And so we need a systemic change. That's my view. Another point is, on the electoral issue, is campaign funding. With, I hate to say it, but I'm going to point some fingers here, but we had a Supreme Court, a majority of justices appointed by Republicans who think that free speech is the ability to write as big a check as you want to whichever party you want. Well, that's fine as long as everyone has an equal amount of money, isn't it? But we know that that's not the case. So again, that's another divisive factor in our system that is not being addressed. And I was, which is why during one of the State of the Union speeches where I was addressing Congress, everyone's there, including the Supreme Court justices, I apparently took the unprecedented step of criticizing the Supreme Court for that decision. Everyone was shocked and awed that a president would castigate or criticize the judicial branch so directly. But that's how important this is, and we need some changes there.
Okay, thank you. Let me now go on to Professor Chan. Heng Chee, could you ask your first question?
Now, I assume both our candidates agree that Asia is where the growth and challenges will be in the coming decades. So my question is on Asia policy. President Obama, how would you maintain your pivot or rebalance policy in the second term if you get one? Where will you get your resources? And what is the difference between balance and containment? For Governor Romney, you have said that on day one you would label China a currency manipulator, what would your Asia policy look like? What would your China policy look like?
Thank you, Heng Chee. So she's asked two different questions, one for Ross, one for Jeff. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go
You
first.
go, okay. You remember the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is true. Governor Romney has said he will label China a currency manipulator. This is required by U.S. law. Governor Romney will merely be following what the law says. President Obama, on the other hand, is not following the law by repeatedly giving waivers. We do know that China manipulates the currency. It is a fact. And should Governor Romney be elected, he will merely be upholding the U.S. law. But broadly speaking, the Asia and China policy is going to be based on partnerships. Governor Romney has talked about a partnership of countries that believe in what he's called the Reagan principles: democracy, free trade, not unfair trade, and we do see that, unfortunately, from some of our trading partners. And I think we'd see a higher level of engagement from the Romney administration that we don't see, again, as I spoke about previously, from the current administration. It's not that the current administration doesn't like Asia, but they're not interested. The pivot was rhetoric. They're domestic policy focused. They were focused for the first 2 years on Obamacare, and in the last year and a half, they've been focused on getting reelected. They want a second term like any first-term administration. Asia has not been a focus of this current administration, and I think we could be confident that the Romney administration would change that.
Thank you. Jeff, two tough questions for you.
Yeah,
Remember them?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have them. But I, for the first time tonight, I feel compelled to address directly what my non-running mate just said. What's quite interesting about building partnerships and free trade, Obama has been pushing the Trans-Pacific Partnership here in the region. And most of the participant countries are very excited about this opportunity and are glad that someone from the West has come in to act as a balance with China for trade relations in the region. Governor Romney, I think when we look at his foreign policy, he's focused on Russia and South America. And those very important issues there, but really, if you have to take everything equally, I would say that Asia is more important, which is the reason for the pivot. In terms of China, this is a big, big issue. We have a commitment from Governor Romney on his day one China policy. Ross is absolutely correct. Under U.S. law, the president has the authority to declare China a currency manipulator and impose countervailing duties on imports of Chinese products. But America has a lot of laws. A lot of countries have a lot of laws. That's not the key. That's not the point of what is the law of the country. The point is, what are your treaty obligations? What are your international obligations from a foreign policy world leader perspective? When you make a bargain, do you keep to it? What he's not saying is that labeling someone a currency manipulator and then imposing duties is not supported under the WTO. It's not completely cut and dried, but most scholars and lawyers who I've looked at and read about, there's a consensus that it's not really supported in the WTO. So America would be in the position of taking a unilateral, illegal act against another country, a major one. One of our biggest trading partners and one of the most important countries in the world for the future, not just for now, but for the future. What can China do in that situation? We know they can't just sit there, right? It's a face issue. There has to be retaliation. There's never a good time for a trade war, but right now is the worst time I can imagine for a trade war.
Heng Chee, Jeff hasn't answered your two questions.
No, he hasn't. I was going to pursue
so
that.
May I just remind Jeff that Heng Chee's two questions are the following. Number one, given the diminished resources available to the United States, how will President Obama be able to maintain its pivot to Asia? That's the first question. And second, what is the difference between a policy of balance and a policy of containing China? What's the difference between balance and containment?
I was hoping to avoid the question by going over time, but Professor Koh.
But you forget she's a professor.
Yeah,
If he gets to go over time, do I get a rebuttal?
it's getting heated now.
Or maybe, Heng Chee, you want to forgive him? Or go on
Yes,
to the
well,
next question. Maybe go on to your second question.
Right. Since I was going to ask about trade, but both candidates has touched on trade in their answer. So maybe I should go on to the third area. To both candidates, how would you handle the Middle East today? What should the United States do with the countries going through transitions, the Arab countries go through transitions? Governor Romney, I read your VMI, Virginia Military Institute speech, and they were them fighting words. You were tough on Iran, and are you going to bomb Iran? For President Obama, you've been criticized for leading a little too much from behind in the Middle East. So what will your Middle East policy be in the second term?